I learned the art of value-based leadership from my father. My father was the founding president and co-founder of Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia. He retired in 1996. And so I grew up in an environment that was very similar to yours. What my father taught me is to show up when you say you're going to show up, no matter how hard it is. And you do what you say you're going to do, no matter how tired you are. But most importantly, he taught me to never give up. And let me tell you how important that was, because early and often, I was the odd girl out, literally. Here you see me at the U.S. Army War College. I'm 28 years old. I was used to being in a room filled with admirals and generals, and I had to learn how to hold my own. And I learned to have enough faith in myself, as taught to me by my family, in order to be able to have a voice in the room. So let me tell you a story. When I was 21, 7 years before this picture, so you can imagine how I looked, I was the youngest appointee at the Pentagon during the Cold War under Ronald Reagan. Not surprisingly, my nickname became Tinkerbell. But I embraced it because my fairy dust was data and determination. And what I learned to do is do my homework in advance. It's a key part of leadership. I would study the issues before we walked into any room. I would dig into what the underlying cause of the problem was we were there to discuss. And I would use research and data as my secret weapon. But most importantly, what I learned how to do is own the elephant in the room. Because until you are brave enough, until you have enough self-confidence to address the elephant in the room, you're never going to solve the reason for the problem that you're there to solve that day. But most importantly, I learned to be agile, planful. I learned to embrace my inner unicorn. When we look at today post-COVID, I think we can all agree that the world didn't reset the way that we thought it would. We have anxiety, we have geopolitical unrest, we have war going on in Ukraine. Yet at the same time, we have groundbreaking changes in biopharma. We have competitive space transportation, and we actually have people out there investing in colonizing Mars. Although our companies are going through a lot of changes right now where we're trying to figure out what to do, we're having to look at shorter timelines for our strategic vision. What we know is that we can still move forward despite ambiguity. And that's what we need to do. And again, we need to embrace our inner unicorn. But it's not always easy getting everybody on board with where you want to go. You're not always going to find the opportunity to move forward with people that think like you do. And in fact, in the most difficult of times is when you need to build alliances with people that may have a counter-opposite view with yours. This is a big story. It's called Getting to the Big Idea Can Be Painful. And let me tell you, getting to the big idea can be very, very painful. Imagine this. You're in a train, not the nice train with the club seats. You're in a regional train. It's hot, cracked seats, horrible bathrooms, all to get yourself to a college town in a taxi, to go to a conference room and sit for hours while the leading public health officials are arguing with the leading members of the food and beverage industry about how to make America healthier. When I took on a task that Ingenuity, the former CEO of PepsiCo, and 15 of her peers asked me to take on, they said, Lisa, we need you to unstick an initiative that's mired in acrimony. Dumb as I am, I said, sign me up. I just love situations like that. The problem that we had is that obesity was climbing to new heights. The regulators, the public health officials, they were looking to place the blame squarely on the shoulders of the food and beverage companies, accusing them of peddling sugar and fat to a population that apparently loved to eat. The company sent their most adept decision makers, their smartest people. They knew that they had to fix their image in the mind of the consumer. And at the same time, they had to work with a group of people who did not like them very much to identify a path forward to support America's youth. The arguments went on for months. I took more migraine medicine than you can possibly imagine. And finally, the CEO of McCormick, the spice company, stepped in and goes, okay, we need to shift things. He goes, Lisa, I'm going to offer up to you the use of our Idea Lab. That's where we bring our clients that are figuring out how to introduce new products. So I packed up the carnival, and it was a carnival, and I moved it down the Northeast Corridor to Baltimore, Maryland. And therein, I sat for hours with facilitators, people trained at places like McKinsey, really smart people. And we had to figure out how we were going to get this group of people to come together on an agreement on how to move forward. People that had never agreed in the past, people that actually, again, didn't like each other very much. And we had a meeting. It was a 2-day meeting. We had all this big white papers all over the wall, you're pasting everything. And we were having a difficult time coming up with a solution. But in the corner, the chief scientific officer of the Campbell Soup Company was conversing madly with a renowned epidemiologist. And all of a sudden, these two women jumped up. And they said, we have it. It's all about calories. Now, in retrospect, we all thought, well, we should have assumed that, but we didn't. We have been so far in the weeds looking at how people make bread, how they made soup, how they made ice cream, how they made cereal. And we'd worked so hard at trying to move this piece and tweak that, and we couldn't come up with a solution. And all of a sudden, in this moment of clarity, they found a common denominator that all of us could rally around: calories. So the 16 companies that I worked for, who made 35% of the food sold in America, we went to Michelle Obama and we said, we will reduce 1.5 trillion calories in the American marketplace over 5 years. And that was the spark we needed to move forward. When John F. Kennedy came forward, he was facing a similar problem. He was facing a problem similar to what we were facing today. He had a nation that was operating in a crisis of confidence. The Russians had just launched Sputnik. Yuri Gagarin, a Russian cosmonaut, had circled the Earth. And the United States was at risk for losing the technological dominance that would allow us to continue to bring forward the free world. And so Kennedy knew he had to think big. He needed to marshal the support, both material and emotional, of the American people, as well as the scientific community. He needed for America to do something that no one had ever done before. And as a result of his vision, we had a man walk on the moon, and we regained our technological superiority. I don't normally use Bible verses, but I thought it was okay in this audience. Where there is no vision, people will perish. To get to an idea, you still need to know where you're going. Unfortunately, we spend, as we did with the food and beverage companies, a lot of time tweaking, poking around the edges. We keep thinking that tactical solutions will bring us big picture types of results. They never do. But there are a couple of tricks that I've learned in each one of the programs that I've run. And these are applicable to anybody. It's not that you don't have to be a leader of the free world like John F. Kennedy was. You don't even have to be Andrew Newey, the CEO of a Fortune 50 company. But instead, what you have to do is identify those aspects of leadership that you're going to personally internalize to move everybody forward together. So first and foremost, you're going to catch your opponent doing something right. In fact, you're going to applaud them publicly. Because we as parents know that sticks sometimes work. But positive reinforcement goes a heck of a long ways when people are disgruntled, when they're unhappy. The second thing that you're going to do is you're going to take into consideration that not one solution is going to solve the problem for everybody. Your customers, your employees, or in my world, a patient advocacy, a patient, everybody comes to a situation with their own framework. Maybe their socioeconomic background, perhaps their religious upbringing, Their individual tastes. They like something, they don't like something. And so if you're going through mergers and acquisitions, or if you're bringing new employees in, or if you're setting up a new partnership, you have to take into consideration their point of view, what makes them motivated, and understand that you may not be able to come up with a solution that works for all of them, but if you loosen up on the how-tos, then you're going to be able to keep people moving forward towards a vision. And that's what we did with the calorie commitment, is we made a decision that we would focus on calories. And what that did is it allowed every company to make changes to their product portfolio in a way that worked for their consumer and that worked for their market. I love focusing on complex problems. If you read my book, what you'll find out is that some way, shape, or form, I have always signed up for jobs that everybody else has failed at. Call me crazy. There have been a lot of points where I've sat on the floor of my bedroom crying before I had to leave for work, thinking, why in the world did I sign up for another one? But I learned how to solve these problems when I was at Intel Corporation. My mentor, Craig Barrett, was Senior Vice President of Intel when he hired me, a 25-year-old, out of the White House to come work for him as his troubleshooter, as his technical assistant. Craig would later become the CEO and chairman of the board of Intel. And what Craig taught me is how to apply manufacturing principles to solving complex situations in government, business, and philanthropy. He taught me to look at process control, just-in-time manufacturing principles, customer support. He used to have me call the Intel 1-800 number and pretend I was a customer over and over again to see how people responded to me, to try and figure out what the problems were. He taught me to benchmark against best-of-class organizations. He sent me all over the world. I got to go to Lego, and I got to go to British Airways and Louis Vuitton to understand how those brands manage their brands, how they set up the infrastructure to protect their trademarks. But most importantly, what Craig taught me is to focus relentlessly on finding the underlying cause. Every job I have ever been brought into, I was the Hail Mary pass. A CEO, a billionaire philanthropist, even the President of the United States would ask me to come in because they tried the same tried and true methodologies and nothing had worked. And so what Craig taught me to do is dig and dig and dig and dig and dig. And what I discovered is that the underlying cause is never what anybody thought that it was, because he taught me to flip the equation on top of its head. He taught me to look at it differently. When the food and beverage companies came together, as I said, we made a commitment to reduce 1.5 trillion calories from the American diet in 5 years. Because of competition, because a group of companies, Pepsi against Coke, Kellogg against General Mills, made a decision to compete on health and wellness, made a decision to compete on calories, we beat our goal by 400% 3 years in advance. We actually reduced 6.4 trillion calories from the American diet. 99% of food sold during that time period was driven by lower calorie products. We worked with the public health community on focusing on the positives, not the negatives. And they were by no means holding hands and singing Kumbaya with each other. But what we were doing instead is that we made a decision to frame our path forward within their vernacular. We said we would talk about health and wellness as a competitive value. And public health saw us embracing that, right? We had products that were being sold that were lower calorie products. Ours was the first step in to what has resulted in now a 13-year relationship of these same people, those people that made me take all that migraine medicine because they were all yelling at each other. They weren't always very nice about things. They are now friends. They are now colleagues. They're working on things that we call food as medicine, diet-related disease, making America healthier by changing the recipes of our favorite foods. They are working together at Google Food Labs, the Milken Institute, the White House Conference on Food, Nutrition, and Health, because they found a path forward together. But I'm going to tell you a different story, because sometimes it helps to see how these different techniques work in different atmospheres. And this one I call the $10 tuna fish sandwich. How would you like to take over a job where your predecessor had been indicted, they put their family on the payroll, they'd abused federal government resources, and the FBI had actually just investigated them, and no one told you when you took the job? Well, I did that when I agreed to be the U.S. ambassador to the World Expo in Aichi, Japan. President Bush, not knowing the history of the event, had made a commitment to Prime Minister Koizumi that the United States would show up at this event. The primary funding agency for the event, another little thing that no one told me, had defunded the effort completely. We had to run a full U.S. operation using zero U.S. government resources, even though I was technically at the State Department. What I didn't even know is that no one was going to pay me for this wonderful effort, and in fact, it would cost me a lot of money. So I want you to imagine this first week on the job. I took my oath of office at Kinko's. No one at the State Department, for some reason, could think of how I was going to get sworn in time to do a press conference with Colin Powell and the ambassador of Japan, as well as Dr. Toyota, the chairman of the board of Toyota Corporation, to sign a bilateral agreement. So I called around, found out they're notaries at Kinko's. Who knew? I didn't know. So I ran over to Kinko's, and I said, are you a notary? She goes, yes, ma'am, I am. I said, great. I need to take an oath of office. She goes, you do? What's it for? And so I told her. She runs back into her office, and she gets a little American flag, and she puts it on a cup. And all of a sudden, all the people that are at the Kinko's are going, what's going on? They're at their copying machines. They're getting their materials. And so everybody came together, and they all stood around me in Kinko's, and I, so solemnly swear to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States, so help me God. And they're all clapping, and it was wonderful. And then 5 hours later, I'm on stage with Colin Powell on CNN.